Namaste, I am Bani Raju, Executive Director of Ganges Valley School. Welcome to Samvadh, a conversation with Ms. Aarti Rajaratnam, a well-known psychologist, author, and an innovative curriculum and educational consultant. Welcome, ma'am.
Thank you.
Glad to have you with us. Today I wanted to explore on the topic communicate to connect. How is that as parents and educators we can communicate with our students and children in a more respectful manner?
When we have to explore respectful communication, we need to also understand how we're modeling disrespect. The first is when we instruct without empathy. Now, many things that we want our children to do or to perform, we assume that they don't have an intelligence or that they don't have the skills, and we just tell them finish this now, or it's in the tone of voice and the way in which we instruct them reduces the ability to connect and to communicate.
So there is a lot of, it comes from the space of controlling the child rather than connecting towards the child. So the instructions are very authoritative, very mundane, very instructional.
Like you say, they don't have any respect for the child. There's no empathy and respect. The second is where we moralize and lecture. When I was a child, I did this, or good children do this, and then we from this lecture space where we feel that the child needs to always be corrected and always be guided instead of supported to do something. The third is where we use sarcasm, criticism, and then just sort of put them down and dismiss their own ability. So even when the child is doing well, but you can't do this, that kind of belittling the child has.
So why does a parent do that, ma'am?
I don't know if it's more of why does a parent do it, but it's really modeled and internalized, because if our voice, the parental voice within us, is one that is dismissive and that is sarcastic, or we tend to use the same voice, and many times we say that the inner voice that we have is usually of the adults who raised us. So it could be just a pattern that's played out, and sometimes it could be also high expectations from my child where I'm not able to use any other method to connect. I feel this is the only thing that will work. So it could be a combination of both these things.
Somewhere it has worked for me from my parents. So I know only that much, and that's what I
want to use with my children. Ma'am, actually some of these things, they don't have very simple cause-effect relationships, because they're not, human behavior is such a vast area, so we can't really say it's just because of this, I'm this way, because then we're assigning blame instead of taking responsibility to work from a more conscious space. And having said that, the other reasons why we don't listen to our children, or why children don't listen to us rather, is where I want to use threats and ultimatums all the time. If you don't do this, this is what will happen, and we somehow paint it as a consequence and things like that, when it's actually a threat. The worst form, of course, is manipulation, where we feel that we can use some kind of a bribe or something like that to get work, and
some
then
kind of emotional
blackmail kind of thing. So if you do this, or if you don't do this, I'll leave you, I'll send you away to a hostel, things like that. And the last is the scorekeeping parent, which I think is by and large the worst form of parenting. Every time the child has made a mistake, they've noted down all those things, and when something else comes up, they're like, but you did this on the other day, I remember that you said this about me, and so on. So these are usually the reasons why there is no connection, and therefore no respectful listening or modeling listening for children. So when you say, how do I respond from a respectful space, we may need to become aware of how am I actually relating to my child now. Am I using these threats? Am I using judgments? Am I using name calling, moralizing, lecturing, all of that? Become aware of the pattern before we endeavor to make the connection.
If you don't do this, you're not going to get your screen time for today. Or if you don't finish your food, you're not going to go out with me. So what is a better way to communicate if I'm saying this? Can you just help me understand how can I change this conversation into a more positive and way which a child can connect?
So again, here I'd like to go through 5 very specific patterns and how they can be reframed, because then it becomes easier for parents to relate to the content. Now, when I'm going to use a revenge model, if you don't do this, then I'll take away your TV time, or I'll take away your gadget. I'm actually telling the child, for everything that you do, I will take revenge. And then the child also becomes this vengeful person later on, who's assuming that everything can be achieved by taking revenge. On the other hand, if we use curiosity in the communication pattern, it becomes easier for the child to listen to something. You can say, I understand that you're very interested in what you're doing, which is why you don't want to listen to me. Can you show me what you like about what you're doing? Let's explore this together for a minute, and then we can do what you need to do. So for example, you want the child to finish his homework or finish her homework. The usual way is, if you don't finish your homework, I'm going to take away your TV or something like that. That is the revenge model. But on the other hand, you can say, I see that you're playing with these plants, or you're observing these insects walking in a line. You'll see young children actually looking at ants and everything. So you say, okay, I understand that you're watching this. Can you tell me what you like about this? Have a gentle conversation there. In that, you're also working with the natural exploration of the child, you're working on curiosity, and more importantly, you're modeling respectful listening. You're saying, I want to listen to what your world is like, and then together we'll work on this homework that you find so difficult. So then it becomes a beautiful way to bond with the child, and the child also understands this is respectful listening.
I see.
That's one example. I could go into many techniques. The second model that I usually use is intimidation. I'm so intimidating to the child that the child has no space to express themselves. But instead of using intimidation, I could use diversity, saying both of us have different needs. My need is this, and I understand that you want to do this. We'll have to find a middle way. And this is slightly when the child is older. For a younger child, we can use curiosity. In the older child, for example, he's constantly playing with his toys, or wasting time. Parents call it wasting time, but the child is doing something. I say, yes, I understand that you want to just chill and watch TV right now. Your need is to relax, but my need is that you have to finish your homework right now. So let's work on how we can both arrive at something, knowing that our needs are different.
So negotiate and come to a middle ground where it is respectfully resolved.
Yes.
To get a
and in this particular situation, the diversity brings the respect, where I understand that as two individual human beings, we can definitely have different needs. But there are certain tasks that we have to achieve together, and that can come from respecting diversity. So that's a second model in which we can do this. The third is manipulation and bribing. So the parent realizes that I can't use the revenge, I can't use the intimidation. Let me use a bribing, manipulation kind of model. If you finish this, I'll get you chocolate. If you finish this, we'll go out for ice cream, kind of thing. Almost like training an animal, if I may, put it in context. Because, animals are trained with food treats. And sometimes, if you finish, I know when we were kids, we were always told, if you study well, I'll get you a cycle, I'll get you a watch. And for years, I remember studying and never getting the cycle. But I think at that point we still took it in our stride. But in the current world that we live in, where everything is so out there and social media exaggerates things, people get sensitive about even small statements that are made, I think we need to sort of move away from manipulation to self-regulation. And by this I mean that when a child is not doing something, and I'm always telling him or her that I'll give you this if you can do this, instead I can say, I understand that you're finding the homework difficult, and it's bringing up uncomfortable emotions in you, or you're finding the TV program much more interesting and that's making you feel a lot more joy and enjoyment. But let's try and work on this because this is a priority right now. So we're being assertive, respectful, but at the same time not getting them to become used to external rewards like a chocolate or something like that. Because when we start giving that, the child is never going to understand that this is my work and I have to do it.
When you're used to it, it is a difficult thing. Let's say if the child is, you tell in a positive manner, and if the child is still not responding to it, how do you further deal with it?
Ma'am, when that is happening, the usual reason is because the connect has not been established. The child has always seen that this parent uses this manipulative technique to get work done, but they're not consistent about it. Now, for example, if I want work done from you, I come, flatter you, praise you to the earth and everything, and after I've got my work done from you, I don't even connect with you for the next 6 months. your understanding of this equation is the next time she comes, I shouldn't help her because she's used me. And children are very, very aware of parents using them. You're like, my favorite kid, why don't you get me a glass of water, kind of thing. But if they just say, when I'm tired, can you help me with a little bit of water, most children respond. But we use these manipulative techniques, which is why children see through it, because there's no consistency. And so when I say connect comes from a very genuine space of respect. I treat you as an equal. You may be younger than me, I may be your parent, but I treat you as an equal. And I give you the respect that is due to you, and I let you know that there are other regulatory ways to deal with it. This is where one of the patterns that I normally see is judgment. You're very selfish, you're useless, nobody will like you if you're like this. So when you use judgment, you've already let the child know that they're not good for nothing.
So you're establishing that with the child, and they start believing that they're probably that.
Exactly.
So you're making your child realize or understand in your communication that they are selfish or they are useless, and it is establishing them to believe what you're actually saying, but it may not be true.
It may not be true at all. It could be just in that particular situation, the child was just protecting himself or herself. They didn't want to be used, and they stood up and, shouted at the parent or said something, and the parent just immediately, rubbished the whole thing, saying you're rude or you're mean. The child has no way to come out of it because they believe everything that the parent is telling them. That's where judgment is so painful for children, because you can never change behavior by making children feel worse about themselves. If you want a behavioral change, if you want your child to listen, it will happen only when they feel better about themselves. And that's why these strategies are so important. So judgment is usually replaced by respect. The fifth strategy that I normally see in Indian parents is domination. Might is right. I'm telling you, so you do it. I'm the parent. Who's the parent here? This kind of, domination where the child is made to feel absolutely no power. And this is very, very painful for children, because after a point, when the parent is like this, the child becomes a people pleaser. They lose themselves and they constantly want to, be accepted. Somewhere the child feels, I'm not good enough, my mom or my dad doesn't like me, so I must go out of my way and please everybody and do whatever they want. I lose myself, but I also lose my ability to set boundaries.
True.
And so that is replaced in the respectful way of setting healthy boundaries, not porous boundaries or rigid boundaries, but extremely healthy boundaries where I am aware of what I can and cannot do in a situation. So modeling these 5 aspects, moving away from what we modeled from our parents, moving into curiosity, moving into more respectful ways of working, actually changes the way in which we can connect and communicate with our children.
So there is this belief in our culture that parent is, we come from a very hierarchical point of view. There is person who is an authority and the person you have to control, kind of a thing. In actual, it is partnership. Even if the child is a toddler, it has to be parent-child partnership, but not coming from an authoritative aspect. So that would help us to connect better with our child. If you're going away from control to connect, you connect better with child. I've personally experienced this with my own children, that when I started realizing that, there are different ways to connect. I was doing Dr. Shafali's course of conscious parenting, and that's where I realized that, importance of communication with the children, how not to be dismissive. For example, when I was, my daughter was very young, she was very scared of lizards. And I would say, if she said, I'm very scared, and she used to panic, I used to say, don't be silly, that's not a dinosaur, it's only a lizard. I was being dismissive, I was not actually empathetic towards her feelings. So I have created a disconnect there. So these realizations happened only much later. And that's one of the reasons also that I've taken this path to, connect with you, talk with you, hoping that more parents can understand that communication is very, very important to connect with our children. And also I would like to know, how do we recognize the verbal and non-verbal cues from the children?
Again here, self-awareness is the first, because Carl Jung says you will meet other people only as deeply as you've met yourself. So if you're not aware of your own cues, if you're not aware of your own verbal, non-verbal cues, which are sometimes very automatic and subconsciously driven, you may not be able to identify it in another person. So for example, if I've never understood that this funny feeling in my chest is anger,
Okay.
I'm only going to call it, I think I had something spicy and it's not agreed with me. It could just be something completely different. So I need to understand what cues in my body communicate to other people. When I start becoming more aware, I'm in a better position to connect with my children. The second thing is, when children are using a behavior, please understand it's always a communication. No behavior is meant to hurt you, no behavior is meant to put you down. Every behavior from the child is an opportunity for them to reach out for help or for support or whatever it is, because they don't have age appropriate words or words that can describe what they're feeling. They're using a behavior. So when you have that, even if you have a meltdown, remember to just stay calm, not speak when the child is going through this, because when you're speaking, it's becoming more overwhelming for the child's brain to process all of that information. The next step is, once the child is a little calmer, to find out what they need from you, because most children usually know, and sometimes it could just be a hug, sometimes they just want you to hold their hand. So many of these things may be non-verbal. The expression from the child could be non-verbal. We always expect, tell me what you want. In fact, there's one technique where there's a use your words, and recent research has shown that most children may not be able to use their words. So very often it's important for parents to become aware of themselves, and when they realize the cues, this is going into a meltdown, the child is going to have this, just stay calm at that point, because your stability makes a huge difference in the way the child will be able to tide over that situation. So many times I call it the sacred pause, because it's as sacred as praying, because your child has no one but you, and if you model something else, they may not have a better chance at life.
Very true. And it's also true that though our words may be saying something, an energy might be something else altogether. So apparently children are very, very intuitive, and they can sense energy. Your words might be saying that, very positive, but your energy might be full of anxiety or fear. That also the children can sense. Can you throw a little light on that?
So we call it congruence. So basically, somebody who's in touch with themselves, in tune with themselves in that sense, the body and the mind and the soul speak the same language. So it's very aligned. So if I'm calm, I'm calm. It's not like, I'm using calm words, but, I'm having this huge, raised heartbeat inside. Children can sense that. And that's because children naturally are aligned, and they're very in tune with themselves, which is why I said in the earlier answer that, we need to be in tune with ourselves to be able to connect to another person. The second aspect of the alignment is, when there is an incongruence, a lot of non-verbal cues will go out. So when the person is saying, I'm not angry, but then the whole face shows it, the child says, but you're lying, I know that. And that throws the parent off completely, because they didn't expect this little 2-year-old or 3-year-old to say you're lying. So many times that's why we ask parents to slow down. This hurried child, there are a lot of beautiful books like The Hurried Child, where we've deprived children of a natural childhood, which is actually gentle, playful and slow. We're actually rushing.
Yes, that reminds me, we have a lot of parents coming and wanting the child to join not in the age appropriate class. They feel that their children, can tell all the names of certain things, they come from memory, and they feel at 3 they should be in a certain class, LKG, whereas, it is not age appropriate. So why the urge for them to grow up faster seems to be a major challenge as educator for us, to explain to them why it is so important to be in age appropriate class.
So age appropriateness is not only from this angle. When the child is in an age appropriate class, they also have a peer group that can co-regulate with them. So they're all at the similar level of understanding emotion and things like that. Whereas if they're in a class that they're the youngest, they don't have that opportunity. So it's difficult, I know, because in a country like India, where all of our parenting wisdom comes from a previous generation or comes from people who are still struggling to find their way, and we are relying heavily on Western books and literature, it becomes even more difficult. So I'm hoping that what we are putting out together reaches a lot more people, and people are able to connect to their children.
Thank you, ma'am.